On a crisp January morning in 1952, a pale sun fought to break through the heavy fog settling over East Los Angeles. At Peace Cemetery, mourners huddled in winter coats, their breath forming ghostly puffs in the air. A modest funeral cortege had arrived to lay to rest Jerome Lester Horwitz, worldwide known as the indestructible Curly Howard of the Three Stooges. There were no honking limousines, no red carpet tributes, only a handful of family and colleagues alongside a sea of grieving fans, their faces etched with sorrow. The air felt thick with conflicting memories, uproarious laughter at childhood screenings of Pie Fight Pandemonium, and hushed tears recalling the tragic final years Curly endured. This wasn't Hollywood glamour, this was raw emotion, laid bare in the cold air. As the minister began to speak, voices trembled with quiet reverence. They recounted Curly's rise from the mean streets of Brooklyn to cellular stardom, the punchy one-liners, the cartoonish pratfalls, the heartwarming friendship he shared with his brothers. Yet few dared to mention the secret pain clawing at him behind that shaved head and bright grin. Then, beneath the gray sky, someone unusual appeared, an unanticipated guest who belonged neither to the family nor to the inner circle of comedians. Her arrival rippled through the mourners, a silent shock more potent than any slapstick gag Curly ever staged. Who was this woman, gliding toward the grave in a somber black dress? And why did her presence cut deeper than any of the Stooges' barbed one-liners? To understand that moment, you have to peel back the bright facade of Curly Howard and peer into the hidden wounds he bore. Far from the energetic clown who shrieked "nuke, nuke" at every opportunity, Jerome Howard was a man of fragile insecurities and deep-seated yearnings. Yearnings that would both ignite his career and ruin the remainder of his life. He was born in 1903, the youngest of 5 Horwitz brothers, cradled by immigrant parents who dreamed of American success. From an early age, young Jerome embodied contradiction. He was shy but fiercely competitive on the basketball court, reserved in the classroom, yet captivating in neighborhood dance halls with his lightning-fast footwork. His nimble steps once drew the eye of George Raft himself, proving that under the unassuming exterior lay raw talent waiting to explode. Yet at age 13, a fateful accident would leave him with a limp and a secret shame he shielded from the world. A stray bullet from an accidentally discharged rifle pierced his ankle, sending Jerome into the harsh glare of a hospital ward. His leg healed, but the scar remained in more ways than one. Terrified of further operations, he refused surgical correction, choosing instead to mask his uneven gait with comedic swagger. Years later, that limp would vanish from the screen as audiences roared, believing it part of his madcap persona. Still, that early wound served as the first fracture in the foundation of his confidence. Life seemed to mend as he joined forces with elder brothers Moses, Mo, and Samuel Shemp in a vaudeville act that morphed into cinematic legend when Ted Healy agreed to let Babe Howard share the bill. But the sharp-eyed agent who dismissed Jerome for looking too handsome inadvertently propelled him toward destiny. In a single desperate act, Jerome stripped away every last hair and ounce of vanity, shaving his head, ditching his mustache, and donning a slapstick uniform that would birth Curly Howard. The transformation was brilliant, but it cemented a lifetime of conflict. Curly's childlike antics sparked universal delight, yet the man beneath recoiled at the mirror. He saw not a comic genius, but a boyish figure forever trapped behind a painted smile. Mo and Larry Fine, his stalwart partners in cinematic chaos, never ceased to try to shield him from the harsh glare of fame, even as studio executives demanded faster gags, more touring, and shorter rest. The relentless grind wore at Curly, who learned to drink, gamble, and spend lavishly in search of relief. He fell prey to loneliness, despair, and the crushing belief that his worth was measured only in ruins and pratfalls. Beneath the laughter lay a man haunted by the question, could Jerome Howard ever be loved again once the wigs and custard pies vanished? The answer, as we'll see, arrived in the most unlikely of places and at the most tragic of times. In the months following Curly's divorce, the man who once commanded cheers with every pratfall found himself trapped in a far more brutal routine. Picture this: endless days blurred together under the harsh glare of Hollywood lights, each slapstick routine a reminder that his body and spirit were fading. The studio's demands were unrelenting. Columbia Pictures insisted on a new short every month, and Jules White, the Stooges' director, refused to slow the conveyor belt of custard pies and eye pokes. When Curly stumbled, when his lines evaporated, Mo stepped in off-camera, softly coaching him through each scene. Crew members later whispered about the hollow look in Curly's eyes, how he flinched at every overhead banana peel, as though expecting it to come crashing down with more force than any cinematic gag. In private, it was worse. The man who once danced with grace on Brooklyn basketball courts, now shuffled through life with a gaze so distant it terrified those closest to him. Mo tried to intervene, reaching out for help from Columbia's head, Harry Cohn. He pleaded, give him a break. Let Curly rest. But Cohn, the iron-fisted studio boss, barked back. Stooges make money. We ain't pausing for pity. And so Curly, only 38 and already battling severe hypertension, was forced to return to the grind. With each performance, his health frayed further, pulling at the seams of his once limitless energy. Then came the invitation that Mo hoped would save his brother, a chance for Curly to rediscover love, a possible remedy for the loneliness that gnawed at him. During a touring engagement in Cincinnati, Mo spotted Marion Buxbaum at a local theater benefit. She was elegant, reserved, a far cry from the vivacious showgirls who pined for Curly's attention. Mo introduced them, painting himself as a cautious wingman, a brother desperate to mend a broken soul. Curly, ever the romantic despite his insecurities, was instantly smitten. 2 weeks later, they were married in a whirlwind ceremony. No fanfare, no big hotel ballroom, just a quick courthouse greeting and exchanged vows. The speed of the romance astounded even the Stooges' inner circle. He fell hard, Larry recalled, like a cartoon character tumbling off a cliff, eyes wide, heart on his sleeve. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like a fresh chapter, Marion guiding Curly toward better habits, coaxing him to eat vegetables, lending an ear when studio calls became merciless. But behind the curt smiles and polite dinner parties boiled a different story. Marion, it emerged, was no guardian angel. Scandalous rumors began to swirl, whispers of lavish spending, of bouquets of jewelry sent to her family under Curly's name. When Larry confronted her, she brushed him off with a thin smile. Curly's generosity is part of what makes him special, she said, but soon the marriage turned into a battleground. Arguments erupted over Curly's drinking, his debts, the endless touring schedule. Among the mourners, a hush falls as an unfamiliar figure approaches the casket. She moves with a deliberate calm, clutching a single white carnation. Every pair of eyes turns. It is Marion Buxbaum, the woman whose actions set the final fatal dominoes in motion. In that moment, sorrow and anger intertwine, crashing over the congregation like a tidal wave. What drove her here? Guilt, defiance, a last twist of cruelty. The wind quiets, as if the heavens themselves are holding their breath. As the soft click of heels echoed on the damp gravel, a hush fell over Peace Cemetery. All conversation ceased mid-sentence. The pallbearers paused, their arms rigid like mannequins. Faces turned as if compelled by a magnetic force. Under the black umbrella held by Larry Fine, Mo's stoic expression fractured. He recognized the silhouette immediately. Marion Buxbaum, the whirlwind bride whose short-lived marriage had become a public spectacle. Her eyes glinted with an indefinable mixture, guilt smeared with pride, sorrow entwined with defiance. The oak coffin cradled a memory of laughter suppressed by tragedy. And now she moved past queues of mourners to lay a single white carnation atop the wood. A gust of icy wind whipped the petals sideways, scattering them like startled thoughts. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. A single teardrop slid down Mo's cheek, catching in the pale light of morning. In that fragile instant, centuries of comedy and grief stood in stark contrast. The roars of audiences from years ago versus the stunned silence in which they all now stood. Mo's gaze burned with a silent question. Why was she here? He recalled the first time he'd seen Curly's face light up when they toured with no script in hand, when improvisational magic turned mundane rehearsals into pure joy. Yet the same improvisation had unleashed a private torment. Days spent sobbing backstage after fights sparked by debts she had piled on him. Memories tumbled through Mo's mind, overheard arguments carried by backstage corridors, the hollow click of her heels as she left him to navigate studio bribes and hospital waiting rooms alone. He clenched his jaw, aching to confront her, to demand answers. But the funeral ground was consecrated soil, sanctified by grief and respect. Any outburst would desecrate this solemn tribute to Jerome, and so he held his tongue even as his heart thundered. When Marion knelt by the casket and pressed her lips to the polished surface, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Fans who had traveled across the country for a glimpse of their hero now faced the architect of his undoing. Some turned away in disgust, others leaned forward in morbid curiosity. The press at the fringes, long eager for any morsel of scandal, snapped photos that crackled like static electricity through the silent air. Journalists jotted furiously, noting every glance, every trembling hand. Headlines the next morning would brand this appearance Marion's final performance, or the woman who crushed Curly's heart stains his grave. Sensationalist, opportunistic yet irresistible. Meanwhile, the cemetery's wrought iron gates creaked open and closed like the shutter of a camera, admitting small groups of curious onlookers who had glimpsed Marion's sleek silhouette on the drive-in. They whispered behind gloved hands, speculating on motives. Redemption? Revenge, or the twisted fulfillment of a vengeful promise whispered in the courtroom. But for Moe and Larry, who stood mute at the graveside, this was neither journalistic fodder nor punchline fuel. It was an unhealed wound laid bare. Their brother's final years replayed like a silent film in their minds, the frantic hospital corridors, the guttural screams of failure when his body refused to obey, the unceasing demand for more gags at their expense. The man they had loved as family was now a cautionary tale, how the machinery of fame could devour a soul. Yet Marion, whose name Moe had once trusted with his brother's safety, knelt motionless, letting grief and perhaps guilt weigh down her chest. In the days that followed the funeral, conversation in Hollywood salons revolved around candid recollections of Curly's zest for life and the tragic irony of his demise. A daughter orphaned of her laughter, a comedic legend silenced too soon, and a woman whose shadow would loom over his legacy. At Columbia Pictures, studio executives debated whether to release previously shelved Stooges shorts as a tribute or quietly bury them to avoid rekindling painful memories. Jules White, haunted by the last pie fight shot without Curly, arranged a memorial screening for cast and crew behind closed doors. The lone reel featuring Curly's final choreography was projected in flickering black and white, each pratfall a ghostly echo reminding everyone of what was lost. Larry, Nancy, and Joan, Curly's niece and daughter, held hands in the back row, sobbing as scene after scene blazed across the screen. Marion was conspicuously absent. Some said she refused to watch, unable to bear the reminder of promises shattered by greed. Others whispered she had requested private viewing privileges, afraid that public exposure would reignite anger among fans. And yet, despite her physical distance, her presence hovered in every mosaic of birdseed, in every jar of leftover custard pie, an invisible crucible that kept Curly's flame alive, even in death. Years later, scholars would piece together fragments of letters to try to decode Marion's true feelings. One faded note read, "I never meant to hurt him, I only wanted someone to care." Another, scrawled in frantic penmanship, declared, "Love is a gamble, and I lost." These documents suggested a woman torn between regret and self-preservation, a contradiction not unlike the man whose funeral she had invaded. He had given himself completely to an adoring public while refusing to heal his private scars. She had embraced his generosity, then recoiled when its magnitude overwhelmed her boundaries. Together they composed a tragic duet that echoed through fan tributes and studies. Today, when viewers stream the Three Stooges shorts, they see more than muddled custard or slapstick choreography. They glimpse the fine line between laughter and lament, a reminder that every laugh casts a shadow of sacrifice behind it. And nestled within that shadow lies Marion Buxbaum, standing alone at peace's threshold, her motives forever tangled in thorny webs of memory and emotion, unresolved. In the overcast twilight that followed Curly Howard's funeral, Moe retreated to the only place that still felt like refuge, the modest bungalow on Morningside Drive where he, Curly, and Larry had spent frigid Brooklyn winters dreaming of vaudeville stardom. As he stepped over the same creaking floorboard that had borne his younger brother's first clown shoes, memories crashed into him like unspent custard pies. He recalled Curly's high-pitched laughter echoing through the living room, the sloppy handstands that blurred into joyous crashes, and the childhood promise they had made to each other, "We'll make them laugh." Yet in that empty house, laughter had gone missing long before the funeral. Moe realized the line between comedy and tragedy was thinner than he'd ever admitted. Meanwhile, in studios across Hollywood, the legacy of Jerome Horwitz reverberated in dusty film reels and archived scripts. Fans who met Curly's daughter Marilyn at conventions spoke of her delicate smile and sorrowful eyes, a haunting reminder that carefree joy had a price. At Columbia Pictures, executives quietly debated whether to throttle out tribute shorts or lock away unreleased footage forever. They feared that any renewed public embrace of Curly's final performances would reignite blame for Marion's role in his downfall or reopen wounds that had barely sealed. So jars of custard pie gags were shelved alongside Curly's hospital x-rays, a silent testament to a studio's unwillingness to share the full story behind the laughs. In 1962, a small museum opened in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the Three Stooges and the vaudeville tradition that birthed them. Its main exhibit featured hand-painted title cards from Curly's earliest shorts, a collection of Moe's battered derby hats, and Larry's frayed knickers. But the centerpiece, advertised in bold print, was an artifact no curator could explain with certainty: a single black shoe, battered and moth-eaten, reportedly found tucked beneath Curly's coffin liner. Rumor had it Marion Buxbaum mailed it anonymously to the museum with a card reading only, "He left his soul in this shoe." Whether the shoe truly belonged to Curly, or if Marion had simply manufactured another twist of irony, no one knew. It stood there, an unsettling monolith, reminding visitors that not all physical traces of a life lived are easily understood. At academic conferences, biographers debated Marion's motives as though interpreting an abstract painting. Some scholars painted her as a tragic figure, abandoned by husbands, schooled to survive in a man's world, ultimately failing to guard her own heart. Others portrayed her as the opportunist Moe always feared, a woman drawn into his brother's orbit by the gleam of stardom, quick to withdraw when debts and demands outpaced her advantage. Every theory hinged on fragments: a yellow diary torn into strips, second-hand accounts from nervous studio clerks, gossip column snippets, glancing at divorce proceedings. Yet despite exhaustive research, the moral truth remained elusive. Was Marion the villain, or simply another casualty in the unforgiving circus of show business? Across generations, audiences who streamed the Three Stooges on digital platforms failed to grasp the darkness lurking beneath each cartoonish pratfall. Modern viewers giggle at curls of whipped cream transforming faces into abstract art, unaware that every slap delivered by Moe carried the weight of pragmatic calculation, an urgent attempt to prop up a young man whose soul teetered on collapse. Larry's exasperated sighs, immortalized in celluloid, echo like a funeral toll if listened to at the right pitch of silence. And behind every woo-woo-woo, one can almost detect the echo of medical monitors counting down his vital signs. The innocence of childhood delight clashes with the stark truth that comedy can be a weapon and a wound. For years, Marilyn Horwitz wrestled with the public narrative of her father. She authorized biographies that showcased his genius but insisted on revealing the human story behind the stooge. In a rarely aired interview, she described returning to the cemetery decades later with her own daughter. She knelt by Moe and Larry's marble memorial stone, placing a yellow carnation among the engraved names. At that moment, she told the cameraman, she felt free to forgive both the studio and her father's ex-wife for the audience she could no longer see. "Father taught me that laughter heals," she said, "but it can also hurt. I had to find the grace to hold both truths." Yet some wounds never fully close. In the quiet hours, Moe confessed to Larry that he still had Marion's white carnation tucked in a drawer, pressed between the pages of Curly's favorite joke book. He'd found it years after the funeral, brittle and brown. He believed it was a reminder of the fine line separating love from exploitation, humor from cruelty, and though he never spoke of it publicly, he left the flower there each night, as though hoping it might bloom again into forgiveness he was learning to cultivate. Ultimately, the image of Marion Buxbaum standing at Curly Howard's grave endures as an unscripted twist that no writer could have anticipated. It encapsulates the paradox of a life lived in service of comedy. The brighter the laughter, the deeper the shadows it can cast. Her presence that day reminds us that every human story has hidden acts, unexpected cameos, and abrupt final bows. As viewers, we laugh because we seek relief, but in doing so we risk overlooking silent tragedies orchestrated behind the scenes. The last guest at the funeral lingered not as a spoiler, but as a haunting final gag, a silent punchline asking us whether the show was ever truly over.